I can't say I'm particularly surprised when Muslim leaders say, hey, don't worry about Sharia law, it's great, it's fine, you don't have anything to worry about, we'll take care of everything. But what annoys me is when Western governments go along with this. So you might remember from a few months back, Motion M103 called on the House of Commons to condemn Islamophobia. So it was a motion, not a law, just to say, we're opposed to an opinion. Really, this is something that should have meant nothing. But, of course, it meant something because of the ever-present boogeyman of institutional racism. Naturally, doing this sparked petitions and concerns about free speech and allegations it was a step towards bringing Sharia law to Canada before it passed in March. The MPs debated the motion in March, and 57,000 people signed a petition aimed at MPs and sponsored by a Conservative MP calling for an amendment to the Constitution stating that Sharia law or separate Sharia courts will never have a place in the Canadian justice system. This is a completely sensible thing to do if you are a Western liberal democracy, and the reason I say that will become clear as we go on with this video. Naturally, this sparked a heated debate, and it got to the point where Arif Virani, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage, rose in the House of Commons to address what he called fearmongering. This motion is not about bringing Sharia law to Canada. Such statements are pure conjecture and should be rejected out of hand because they lack any merit. But spiritual leaders say that Sharia and rules that govern religious practices and other faiths are not to be feared by people outside their communities. Yes, okay, but what about the people inside their communities? What about those people? Do they have a legitimate cause to fear these laws? Because more importantly, Sharia as a religious set of guidelines is already in Canada, just as Roman Catholic canon law and Jewish halakha, which I'm not even going to try and pronounce correctly, are here for those who choose to observe it. And that's where the rub is, for those who choose. Now, I don't know if I have to introduce anyone to the concept of duress or coercion, but we'll get to this in due time. It's all around you, said Imam Mohammed Jebara, chief imam and resident scholar at the Cordova Spiritual Education Center in Ottawa. Every time a Muslim goes to pray, whenever I cook and take my food to my neighbors, that's me exercising what Sharia teaches me. Yes, voluntarily. However, that's not always the case. In fact, in many cases, it's not the case at all. Rabbi Elizabeth Bolton said that the impact of these practices are usually confined to their communities. The fact is, there are all kinds of religious laws currently being practiced in Canada that have no effects on folks that are not part of those religious traditions. Okay, but the problem that we have in these countries is we don't have legal systems that are two-tiered. As in, one for one type of person and another for another type of person. We have universal laws that apply to everyone indiscriminately because justice is meant to be blind because that is the only way we can actually be just. Bolton told CBC News that she's convinced objections over M103 and the connection to Sharia law that people are making is bigotry, plain and simple, which is rather ironic given that this is coming from a woman, but again, we will get to this in due time. I suppose because it's unknown and complex and sounds like something fearful, as if what is practiced within a different religious community could somehow in Canada be imposed on those who are not adherent. Well, I mean, I'm just saying historically that is what happened. But it doesn't matter if they're not adherents of Islam. What matters is that there are people who are suffering under Sharia law in Western democracies. That's the problem. Religion is, after all, a voluntary association in Canada, and I'm sure that by the letter of the law, that's true. The problem is, for example, I met a young chap at, I've forgotten his name now, at the meetup in London. He had a huge knife wound in his leg. I mean, it had healed up, but he showed me the scar. It was horrific. He was an ex-Muslim. Where do you think he got that scar? That's right. Muslims had attacked him for being an apostate. Even though it's obviously illegal, it shouldn't apply to him because he's no longer a Muslim, but fucking hell, there is simply no way of getting around this. These people have their own laws and they observe them regardless of whether or not they're in contradiction to our own laws. They don't care. Or at least, and not all of them. Oh my God, Jesus Christ. I didn't say all of them, did I? Oh God, no, some of them. But a significant number, and a number that will literally go out and do harm to people for contravening these laws. But it's not all of them, remember, so that's just fine. Actually, no, it's not fucking fine. The point is justice for all. Not justice for some people or most people or not all of them. Fucking hypocrites. And then we get legalistic. In order for the Sharia-inspired rules to apply, you have to accept the basis and teachings of Islam. And if you reject these, people will try to kill you. Sharia, he explained, is not a law. Rather, it's a methodology for life, regulating everything from personal hygiene and charity to pilgrimages and burials. I wonder if we could call this taqiyya. Because if it wasn't a law, why would you have Sharia courts? If it was just a methodology to live your life, there would be no need for a fucking judge. Bullshit, you liar. And the thing is, apologia is one of the things that marks this, constantly. Religious laws apply to a believer's spiritual life. They don't trump Canada's criminal code, civil law, or other statutes. Except in practice. De jure, maybe they don't, but de facto they certainly do. Which is why in the UK, Sharia courts are facing a government inquiry over the treatment of women. And this is why feminists and progressives and, hell, people who love their mothers and wives and daughters might be concerned about such a thing. So this was launched back in May 2016, and they were inquiring into whether the courts are discriminating against women, legitimizing forced marriages, issuing unfair divorce settlements, etc., etc. Rather than read the article, why don't we just go straight to the source, the Sharia Council's inquiry, which is on the Parliament website. Let's have a look at the latest evidence that was published on the 1st of November 2016. And just to note, due to the general election in June, the committee has now closed the inquiry. Following the dissolution of Parliament in May, all select committees cease to exist until after the general election. If an inquiry on this subject is held in the future, the committee may refer to the evidence as already gathered as part of this inquiry. Basically, this has been dropped quietly by the government because, frankly, this is going to cause more hassle than it's worth. For them anyway. And they're certainly not going to like this, because they're going to start screaming, oh, Islamophobia, oh, racism, oh, discrimination, but let's have a look at the evidence. So this is testimony from Dr. Elham Mania. In a country that prides itself on respect for human rights and women's rights, it's very interesting to see that many women of Islamic faith are left in a system that more or less abuses them. Instead of one law applying to everyone, women are more or less pushed to use a certain parallel system of justice. I appeal to you to consider the type of law that is being applied. Why is abuse taking place? Women are going to Sharia councils because they would like to get a religious divorce. Sometimes they find that Sharia councils are the only recourse for them to get a divorce. I understand that, but at the same time, the type of Islamic law that is being implemented in those Sharia courts is often what one might call an anthropological type, something that is taken out of its context and implemented without much regard for the developments that have taken place in many Islamic countries or the types of progressive laws that can be developed in this respect. Unfortunately, the type of Islamic law that is being implemented looks at a woman as a perpetual minor, someone who needs to have a certain kind of guardian regardless before and afterwards. If I look at Sharia councils, according to my research, yes, you have those that will try to help women in difficult situations, and you have those that are abusing women. But in general, the framework within they are working is one that is inherently discriminatory against women. Specifically, we know that these types of jurist opinions are promulgated in a certain period between the 7th and 10th centuries. I believe that they reflect the social norms and historical perspective of that time. It's very interesting that here in Britain we would like to take the most rigid interpretation of Islamic law and disregard all of the developments that are taking place in other countries of Islamic faith that are more or less helping women. That is basically all you need to know. Women in Sharia law in Britain, and I'm going to guarantee to you that in Canada, are being treated as if they are living in medieval Arabia. Is that a way that you want women to be treated? I know it's not very nice to think about, but we're going to have to anyway. So let's have a look at Sharia law. So one aspect of Sharia law that we're going to look at is polygamy. I know the recording isn't even here, but screw it. I'm on a laptop in a hotel. Give me a break. So marriage. One thing that Sharia permits is polygamy. They call it polygyny because it has certain restrictions on it. In Islam, the ideal marriage is a monogamous form of marriage. Limited polygyny is a provision approved by Islam for exceptional circumstances only with many stringent conditions. So what are the limits placed on a man who wants to have multiple wives under Islam? First of all, the maximum number of wives you can have is 4. Why we would want that, I don't know. But secondly, the stringent conditions on a person who wanted to marry a second wife, he must be able to provide and maintain the family and also deal with on both bases of justice and fairness. In chapter 4, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, the rule is you must be able to treat them both the same. And if you don't have the ability to support both in a like manner, then you can't have a second wife. Not really particularly well thought out if you actually take the time to think about it, because someone's financial situation changes during the course of their life. It goes up, it goes down, and who knows where it'll end up. But let's just assume that he will always have the ability to maintain these wives fairly. So why is this a problem? Well, this is a problem, frankly, for women. What to expect when you're expecting a co-wife? So this woman says, so you're happily married to the Muslim man of your dreams when suddenly he drops the P-bomb, polygamy. For whatever her name is, a 23-year-old Muslim convert and college graduate, her husband's announcement of his intention to marry a second wife devastated her. I'm shocked, hurt, angry, and confused all in one, she wrote in a letter to him. Seems like a recipe for divorce, right? Polygamy is illegal after all. Yeah, exactly. You'd think he would just be unable to do it, but doesn't matter to the Muslims who are living under Sharia law. They don't care about secular law because Sharia law comes from God. But Aziz didn't play that card with her husband, 15 years her senior. Under the law that mattered to her, classical Islamic law, she accepted her husband's right to take up to 4 wives as allowed by the Quran as long as he could treat them equally. At first, she wrestled with jealousy towards her co-wife, pined for her husband on the nights and weekends he stayed with his second wife, who lived half an hour away. Eventually, a peacefulness settled in her heart and a friendship with her co-wife blossomed. I am in polygyny because I want to be, she wrote on her blog. Polygynous blessings. Amazing, isn't it, that she seems to have convinced herself that she actually wants this, despite the fact that she knows that she doesn't. I mean, you could call it internalized misogyny, but then we don't want her to have internalized Islamophobia. But you know what? Ultimately, fuck her feelings. I don't care. She's the one who chose to stay with this guy, who decided that he would illegally marry another wife. I don't care if she's upset by that. Not my problem. That's her problem. Just letting you know that exists. My problem with this is that it gives a moral permissiveness to the concept of polygamy, which ends up in women being hurt and abused. And I say women, but what I really mean is girls. For example, £1,200, the cost of a Syrian refugee bride in Turkey, because this is acceptable under Islamic law. It's forbidden in Turkey under their secular law, but fuck their secular law if you're an Islamist. The old Turk came to the Syrian matchmaker with a wish list. His second wife should have green eyes, be tall, white-skinned, and no older than 17. He would pay well, more than £2,000 if the right girl could be found. Are there any feminists who have a problem with this? Just any feminists at all? Anywhere on earth who have a problem with women being sold like chattel for the sexual pleasure of an old Turkish man because of the Sharia law that permits him to have multiple wives, even if secular law forbids it. Is there one fucking feminist in all the world who cares about this? He did not plan to stay married for long. Well, why would he? It's just a girl that he can fucking dump whenever he wants. Fuck her, right? Like many of the Turkish men who purchased Syrian teenage refugees as wives, he would divorce her after a few months once he had tired of her, because why the fuck not? The man wanted to have a good time. The woman's family wanted money. That's how it works. Oh, bravo. So progressive. If they're very beautiful, that can pay £2,500 for her. The youngest I've heard of being married was 13. Oh, there's no problem with this. Polygamy is illegal in Turkey and unions are not recognised by law, leaving women with no rights or legal recourse. Women having no rights? Oh, what's that? A deafening silence from feminists? Yeah, I thought so. The marriages are often kept secret, with the young woman being placed in a separate flat away from her husband's family. Many escape or are abandoned. Like they're dogs or something, isn't it? In her living room in a rundown district, 30 miles from the Syrian border, 23-year-old Noor stared at her hands as she haltingly told the story of how she'd been duped. Her husband not only tricked her into a sham marriage, but cheated her out of a new future with her family in Canada and failed to get her vital medical treatment to prevent blindness. But hey, what difference does it make? She's his property. Her parents were desperate to marry her off because they feared for her safety as a single woman. We saw how men looked at her in the street and we knew she had to leave. And it was good she go to a Turkish man. Noor's husband insisted on his Islamic wedding ceremony, which is not legally binding. He promised that he would, unless you're using Sharia courts, unless you believe in Sharia law and want to fucking obey it. Or, when I say want, I mean you've forced and coerced into doing so. He promised that he would process the legal paperwork once the couple were installed in their new home in Ankara. Once there, she found herself shut away in the house. Her mother-in-law beat her and abused her and prevented her from showering or speaking to her family. That's lovely, isn't it? Noor's husband had also promised he would find a way for her to receive treatment for a malformed cornea in her right eye, which threatened to blind her at any moment. Far from getting her medical treatment, he tired of her after a few months and sent her back home. The dream of Canada was gone, and her bright blue right eye now bulges out of its socket. Is there anyone with a problem with this? This is just nothing to worry about. No feminist activism, no hashtag campaigns, no petitioning of governments or international courts. This is just... don't care. By the way, there was someone manspreading on the subway earlier. I want them arrested. Most of the men lie. They say that they're rich and that this is forever. I think most of the girls believe them, but then they find out they aren't really rich, and I think maybe 50% are beaten. Well, that's okay, because we have rules for beating our wives in Islam and under Sharia law, so there is literally no recourse for this, as long as he's beating you in just the right way. And I say all of this because 22% of Muslim women in England do not speak English or do not speak it well, so they have trouble finding help if they want to go outside of their communities, because not many people outside of these communities in Britain speak Arabic, if you can fucking believe that. So yes, 22% of Muslim women speak English not well or not at all, right? So what happened? Well, the government said, well, maybe, it was David Cameron at the time, he said, maybe, just maybe, we should be encouraging Muslim women to learn to speak English specifically, so if they are being abused by these Sharia courts, as we actually know that they are, they can actually come to the secular courts to get an actual redress of their grievances and find some fucking help to preserve their human rights. What happened? Oh, what a fucking bigot. Cameron's call for Muslim women to learn English sparks outrage. His comments sparked outrage from Muslims and migrant advocates who say the state is unfairly singling out Muslim women while providing limited resources for newcomers in Britain to learn the local language. Well, look, you don't want them to learn the local language, apparently. That's unfairly singling them out. But seriously, shut the fuck up. Sharia law is a fucking cancer. We should not be operating any religious laws, voluntarily or otherwise, in this country. We should have one law of the land, and that's it. And if you say, well, I'd like to set up a Sharia court, the answer should just be no.